Hello, I'm an American living in Moscow, Russia, and this will be my first time watching raw reaction on camera of the Trump-Harris presidential debate. Let's get to it.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation.
Trump mentioned World War III. You know, that's an important point because a lot of people, they leave me comments and they say, well, Joe, it doesn't matter who wins. And I think that's a dangerous idea. It may not matter, but, and Trump might not do what you want, but I think she is not competent. And if you don't live in the US and you think you'd rather the US not do so well, I understand that urge, that feeling. But, you know, because the US is the world empire right now, if they completely collapse badly and quickly, that's going to be hard on everybody, in my opinion. You don't want total crazy people in charge of the biggest empire in the world right now. And, you know, the experts say we are as close as we've ever been to World War III.
Have fun.
Thank you.
In my opinion, that was a bit awkward. She should have walked just to the center of the stage, in my humble opinion, to shake his hand, not come all the way over into his space.
When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid.
So let me start by saying something, I guess, polite. You know, I don't want to just be mean the whole time. But I would say, physically, I don't know what else you'd want to see if you wanted a female president. She looks great. And she's good at delivering a speech, I guess. She just gave a speech. It sounded nice. But she did not answer the question about whether or not we're better off than we were 4 years ago. She just went on a speech about life in general.
You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality. And we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
So for Trump, I would say he looks better than he's looked in a few months, to be fair, for a 78-year-old guy. But he does seem kind of tired right now at the very start of the debate. Maybe he is tired. I hear he's doing lots of town halls and speeches. But, you know, maybe he's also trying to be strategic and maybe act not that strong so that she'll get a little bit loose and mess up with her words. I don't know. He is clearly answering the question, which is technically the correct thing to do. It's a bit boring for audience members that would be low-informed voters, let's say.
Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's...
Okay, so right there, she's trying to blame Donald Trump for the, let's say, 2-year worldwide medical event that happened. I can't say the name. It's better that I not say the name for the algorithm. You know what I'm talking about. And I think that is disingenuous to put that on him because we all know that was a worldwide event that came from the other side of the world. She seems to me a bit too nervous, just a little bit, like I can see it because I give speeches and I can see. She seems a little bit like this, just a little bit, because sometimes I'm like that when I have to give speeches. And he seems the opposite. He seems a little bit too, dare I say, sleepy Trump. But don't start that nickname, guys.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people.
She doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes.
Basically sold us out when a policy about China should be in making sure the United...
Okay, so I'm sorry to say it, she's doing it again. She was asked a clear question. She said, okay, they said to her, you know, we're trying to make the point that maybe tariffs aren't good, but you kept all of Trump's tariffs for 3.5 years. And then she goes on a speech about something else to try and get us distracted and think about another thing that maybe we might not like about Trump.
She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy, but if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminal.
That's a good thing that he said, whether it's true or not. If you're an uninformed American voter and you're just concerned for your country and you don't know that much about her, and you hear him say her father is a Marxist professor, that's going to stick in your head and give you doubts about her for sure.
Many of these people coming in are criminals, and that's bad for our economy too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
You were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America.
They just said, you know, what about this issue of Central American migration into the United States? And it's interesting because in Russia, you might hear the same question, except it would be Central Asia. So it's just interesting that, you know, these are two different countries in two different places, but they both have southern countries that have migration into their country that they are debating about and concerned about.
People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's busing them in and paying them to be there. And then...
Yeah, I've heard that she's busing people into her rallies because she doesn't have a large enough audience, whereas he has huge audiences. So I don't know why she would bring that up. I will say, you know, because I try to look at this objectively, if you knew nothing about either one of these people, she looks more vibrant than him. You know, it makes my skin crawl to hear some things she says because I don't believe her because I already have a backstory on her and him. You know, I come into this, you know, with already ideas in my head, even though I haven't seen it yet and I haven't heard any headlines on how this went and what people think of it. You know, I'm trying to be objective here, and I will say, you know, like I said, she looks fresher than he does, especially in that still image right there.
Showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. Not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And
you know, she's laughing, but I am hearing these news stories that this is happening.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the...
To say, but I saw it on television. That's not a good response, Trump. I'm sorry.
That's why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who...
Okay, so she just mentioned a bunch of famous Republicans, but they are all people that I think many would call rhinos, which means Republican in name only. And it is interesting this time that we're in where Trump might be president again. I feel like we're seeing a new divide, and it's not really about Republican or Democrat anymore. It's about, you know, warmongers, let's say, versus people who want peace. And so even though Trump is running as a Republican, he wasn't always a Republican. And now he's had RFK Jr., you know, Kennedy's nephew, join him, who was a Democrat. Tulsi Gabbard has joined him, who was a Democrat. Then Kamala, who's representing the Democrats, she's got these rhinos, these Republicans in name only, people like Dick Cheney, who was the vice president that we feel like was really pulling the strings, that was in charge of all these Middle Eastern wars, now endorsing her. So you're seeing all this side switching happen, like a lot in rapid time. And so to me, it's looking more clear. It's not really about Republican and Democrat anymore. It may be about people who want, you know, endless wars so that the elite can make money, and people who do not.
His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term.
She's listing all these people that are against him, that have been part of his party, let's say. But, you know, if you're informed and you're fed up with DC and you're fed up with both parties, you hear her saying that and you're saying, good, I'm glad those guys don't agree with Trump. I don't care what those guys think.
I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire them. This will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow, and I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done.
Yeah, so that's a theory that some people throw out that they're thinking is that Kamala's side of DC, let's say, they have erased the border and they're allowing all this illegal immigration into the U.S. because they want these people to vote for them.
And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall.
Very interesting, because in Russia, migrant crime is an issue as well. It's interesting the similarities between these two countries, America, the U.S., and Russia.
All violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
That is the second time the news anchors, the moderators, tried to correct Trump on something he said. They have not tried to do that with Kamala. So it's very interesting. In my opinion, in their role, they should not be getting involved. They just ask the questions and let them respond. Now, outside of this, if they want to give their opinion on their own show, that's fine. But in this role, I think they should not be trying to correct either one of these people.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear.
Very, very interesting. So the way it looks to me is her party, her side of DC, has been pursuing him and trying to charge him and trying to make him look bad and get people to come out against him. And this has been going on for years. And now she's going to stand there and say, look, you are one of these guys. You are someone who's in trouble with the law. But it looks to me like he's only in trouble with the law because her people trying to get him to be so. And so now she's going to use that as a fact against him, even though it's something they manufactured.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run.
Very interesting. Okay, so he said it. He said it on the stage that he took a bullet to the head and that they're talking about this Russia stuff. And they're just like, moving on, you know. I think if the roles were reversed and she was saying something like that, they would absolutely dig into it further.
The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work, to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term.
Okay, so she's trying to attack him with a class argument, like putting poor people against rich people. And I'm so sick of this argument. And I think the American people are also getting sick of it as well. We should all care for everyone. We should want everyone to do well. And if you are so lucky as to be a rich person, you're giving people jobs. And I think that we need to stick to the facts and what's best for the country as a whole, and not try and pit all these different groups against each other.
I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now. if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out.
She was doing that in debates before, I think with Mike Pence. So that's funny.
400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a lot.
So he seems fired up now. He doesn't seem sleepy. He seems like he's getting into this debate, maybe because they're more on business topics that he's passionate about. And one thing I've been noticing in his interviews since he got attacked is he usually has his hair covering his ears. But since then, the ear that was damaged, which looks completely fine now, is uncovered. I don't know if he's trying to intentionally show, look, I'm fine, or if the doctors told him to keep his hair off his ear for a while. I don't know. But
Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying...
So that's a good point. So Trump said peacefully, and he's now giving proof that he wanted extra security there. So he's saying, look, I wanted the security. It was denied. I thought it was going to be needed for that crowd. And I said in my speech to be peaceful.
There was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And
okay, so now she's quickly going off to another story, which is not part of the discussion right now. And 140 law enforcement officers were injured in January 6th from what? Stubbing their toe? I mean, that's silly. And you know, I've seen lots of videotape of the officers in charge opening up the gates and walking these Americans in to the Capitol building. Like, it looks to me, I could be wrong, but it looks to me like a setup to make Trump look bad, where you have cameras everywhere and all through this building, law enforcement are pulling the gates and guiding people in. And Nancy Pelosi, they did not want the extra security that he asked for. It looks like they tried to set Trump up.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to...
That's a good line by her, I must say, even though I don't agree with her to try and get under his skin, since he's known for his show, The Apprentice, where he says, you're fired. For her to say he was fired by 81 million people. I don't like it, but I'll admit it's funny.
I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris.
And this is the main reason why I hope Trump becomes president. Not because I like him, not because I think he'd be perfect on everything, but he has said over and over and over again that he wants the conflict with Russia to end. And if he means it, that means lives saved. And as a Christian, I am for that. And, like I've said before, it's a roll of the dice. He may not do this, but he's the one saying he wants to do this, and she is not. And that's why I would be for him. And he said it so many times that if he doesn't do it, it's going to make him not look good. It's going to hurt his political capital.
That these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including...
Okay, and that's just flat wrong for her to say that he's weak. She's taking quotes that he has said, and she's using just parts of them, and she's using them inaccurately. The fact is there was less drama and war and chaos around the world when he was president.
Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask what...
So yes, Putin endorsed Biden a couple months ago. Now he's endorsed Kamala Harris. And so people are wondering, does he really mean this or not? So the idea would be he would want them to be president because then the U.S. will continue to have trouble and continue to be weak. And then Russia can be strong. But the competing idea would be, no, he really would like Trump to be president, and he's just being strategic here and playing chess and saying the reverse, so that people don't say that Trump has the support of Russia. And because if Trump becomes president, then the conflict will end, and that will mean less loss of life. yeah, America would likely be stronger under Trump, I think. But at this point, I don't think that necessarily means Russia is going to be weaker. I think Russia has already broken away and grown stronger because of the sanctions. And I don't think that clock can be turned back now if America starts doing better.
And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National
It's very funny. Trump, it feels to me like Trump starts to get on a roll and talk about interesting things, and they like to cut him off. And also, if you're wondering, well, how Trump's not telling the truth, and how could he be so bold as to think that he is going to end the conflict on day one or before day one? Well, I don't think the conflict can continue to happen without U.S. support. So that's how he can be so sure that if he wants the conflict to end, he has a way to make it end very easily.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion.
And so he said again, he says it all the time, he wants the death to stop. And just the whole way the guy's framing this thing between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, if it's just between these two countries, Russia would not lose, so it's just not even really a debate, in my opinion, unless we're talking about moving to World War III.
And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if where is our...
It's a good point. It's absolutely true. We should all have a healthy fear right now and do whatever we can, whoever you are, whatever power you have, to help World War III not happen. And that is the brink that I think we're being taken to here.
We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify.
Very good point. Biden is technically still the president, but we don't hear from him. We hardly see him. So who's really in charge?
Do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right,
negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your...
Very good. Absolutely correct. So they're trying to push him to say who he wants to win. And he doesn't want to take that bait. It's not about that. It's especially if the U.S. is not involved, although we all know really the U.S. is.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800...
She's painting this picture that Putin is the one trying to take over the world, and she's projecting, what her side is for. In my opinion, they want the United States of New World Order. And so it's just absolutely ridiculous to try and have this argument about this huge country, Russia, and this other smaller country, and them alone working out the conflict and hoping the tiny guy wins. That's not what's going to happen. It's either the tiny guy is going to lose, or this becomes a world war, period. And I don't know why she's laughing through this. She's got that nervous laughter. It's like the Joker or something.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow, quiet please, he would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war, because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said...
Yeah, and you can't, even if you think Russia's the bad guy, which I don't, I live here, You cannot be so black and white about it. You've got to negotiate. You cannot just stand there and say, we're right, and we're just going to foolishly go ahead with this thing that isn't going to work out. And by the way, let's send other people's young males to expire on our behalf. I mean, you've got to be reasonable and step back and not be emotional about this thing and think about what can be done. And I do think that the mainstream media tries to push this narrative that Russia wants to expand, when in fact they're the ones that just keep expanding and expanding and expanding. And what do they expect is going to happen from Russia or from any other country that doesn't want to bow their heads to this new world order that's trying to grow, out of the West?
Respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility.
It's funny how she looked like she was trying to hold her tongue there to not call him some disgusting name.
To give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction.
Just her smiling through these intense points he's trying to make all the time, it in my opinion, is just not a good look. It is not a good look for someone who needs to be an international, on the international stage, world leader and be strong. It looks weak to me. I mean, when I have to say something important, I don't think I smile. I smile a lot, but not when my heart is moved on a serious issue.
To defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has a plan to not allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay,
that's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to respond because the former president has said something
sorry.
Twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry, we're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president.
That was a good, intense argument where they were bickering back and forth, and then Kamala got cut off, which is not a good look for her. Look at that desk there that the reporters are sitting at. I like it. It's very shiny and transparent. Looks like they are piloting the Starship Enterprise.
Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right.
It's a good point. I like how he went through all these quick details of how the Biden administration has these connections all over the world that seem fishy. And it's helpful because they are always trying to say, oh, Trump is in league with Russia, Trump is in league with Russia. Whereas they have more issues with all these other countries, including Russia, apparently.
And focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away.
Very interesting, also a bit boring. I think her closing speech was just blah, blah, blah boring. I felt my eyes glazing over. And I think that his was very good. I felt two main points from him, and that is he just bounced it right back at her and said, you say all these things, but you're in power now. Why aren't you doing it now? And then his second point is we are on the verge of World War III, which I think is not a game. It is serious, and we all need to be aware of this stuff. So now it's your turn. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of this debate. And if you don't know who I am, as I said at the beginning, I'm an American who lives in Russia, and I do this channel specifically because I want the West, Westerners, regular people, and people around the world to see Russia for what it really is. It is not a scary place. It is a normal place full of families. And I encourage you to watch some of my videos right now, which are mostly out and about on the street with normal Russians, making it exciting, making it fun, making it informative, and hopefully, although it may sound silly, bringing peace to the world. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe, even if you think you're already subscribed. It looks like subscriptions are mysteriously disappearing, so make sure you're subscribed. Leave a comment, share this with your friends, and click the box to see what happens next.
В этом комфортабельном автобусе он находится на парковке. Присоединяйтесь к нашей группе. Ведет телеканал Москва 24. при поддержке Министерства туризма. Что смотрим? Исторический центр Воробьёвы-Буры, Минская, Мосфильм, Поклонная гора, Москва здесь будет обязательно. И туда едем только мы. Белый дом.